I'd like to welcome you all to the Public Roundtable on Sustainable Mobility. I'm going to start by introducing both myself and the panel, and then I'll hand the mic over to the panelists here, and they can introduce themselves to you. I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of the event as well. So my name is Kate Lawless, and I'm assistant professor at the Center for Global Studies at Huron University College. This particular roundtable is being offered in conjunction with a course. So the course is called Community in Global Modernity. And in that course, we're focusing on the idea of sustainable community in the era of globalization. So that's our main focus. This particular roundtable is an element of that focus. So for this, we're focusing on the idea of sustainable mobility. Now, this course has a fairly large community-based research component. So what we're doing here is we're attempting to find out how is the idea of sustainable community and sustainable mobility in particular mobilized in our own community, right? So that's the basic foundation of the course and of this panel. And the way that I'd like to run the panel today is I'm going to offer a few opening questions to our panelists. They'll start by answering those. Then I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to ask my students to ask their questions first. Some of my students have prepared questions in advance. And then we'll open for more questions from the general public. I'd ask you all to turn your mobile phones off if you don't mind, or put them on silent. And if you need to use the restroom, it's just over here on my left, your right. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to pass this mic over to the panelists. By the way, this mic is for recording purposes only, so it won't amplify your voice, but I need to be able to bring it around if you're speaking. So just raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and I'll bring the mic over to you. Okay, can I ask you to start, Ben?
I guess so. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi. I'm Dr. Benjamin Cowie, owner of London Bicycle Cafe. I don't use that title very often anymore, but my PhD is in Earth and Planetary Sciences, and so I have a pretty substantial understanding of Earth's planetary systems and the need for sustainable mobility. So welcome all to our space. I love that you're here, and thank you to all the other panelists for making some time to come do this today.
Cool. My name is Daniel Hall. I'm the executive director of London Cycle Link, which is a nonprofit cycling advocacy group in the city. I'm also consider myself a transportation planner, not necessarily formally designated, but I like to think about transportation a lot and have done so for 8 to 10 years now. So.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jay Stanford. I'm the Director of Environment, Fleet, and Solid Waste. So it's a long title, but obviously I wear many hats. But what's really pertinent to today is that folks in my area are very involved in active transportation and transportation demand management, outreach programs, and working very closely with the city designers that build the city, particularly from a transportation side. And of course, a part of my title is the fleet. So we're very interested in how we can continue to green our fleet here in London. So we're really looking forward to, or I'm looking forward to today. And I guess you really have to, though, understand, and you might not, how important today's session really is. And hopefully you'll hear from the panelists here why it is that important, because the transportation system within a city is probably second to none from a community building perspective, and how in the future we will move around.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I am Cheryl Ruth. I'm the chair of the London Transit Commission. This is my 4th year as chair. I served as vice chair for the first of my term. I am here because I really want people to understand how vital public transportation is, and I'm really interested to hear your feedback on what makes that important.
Hello, my name is Tonya Park, the recently retired city councillor for downtown. You might remember me from the municipal election. I ran for mayor. I was the one touting the bus rapid transit plan, making sure that we're investing in public transit for the next 30 years and also infrastructure in our city. This is a very timely moment for London. Next week, the City Council will be having a public participation meeting talking about the future of rapid transit. So if I could put a plug in, get to Centennial Hall next Wednesday at 3 o'clock to have your voices heard should you want that to happen. Right now, I'm the associate producer at the London Fringe Festival. We're one of the festivals that integrates public transportation into our venues to make sure that each and every one of them is accessible. So look forward to the conversation today and glad to meet all of you.
So I just want to thank these speakers for being here. This is an amazing opportunity for both you and for them. So without further ado, let's get to the questions. I have two basic questions to begin with, and I'm going to ask them at the same time, and you can kind of answer them together. So the first is, how would you define or characterize sustainable mobility? And the second is, what do you see as the main obstacles right now to sustainable mobility in London?
Thanks, Kate. So I think there's three things when I think about sustainable mobility, three problems that sustainable transportation has to solve. The first is climate, the second is energy, and the third is space. And a sustainable transportation system solves all three of those issues within a city to give people mobility, which is ultimately what we're after. In London right now, the only thing standing in the way of sustainable mobility is political will. We have the technology to do this. This isn't something that we're waiting on new technologies to emerge. All the technologies exist. So that's the only thing that, from my perspective, stands in the way of us having a truly sustainable transportation system.
Ben was very short and succinct, but I'm going to stretch it out here a little bit. So I think when we talk about sustainable mobility, I'm going to break it down into the two words, and I'll talk about mobility first. Sometimes when we think of mobility, it's very easy to jump to like technologies or modes, right? So we think of public transit or biking or driving. But I think I want to define mobility, and we don't have to continue this definition, but just for my talk right now, mobility as how far you can get somewhere in a certain amount of time. So let's say it's half an hour. How far can you get in that half an hour? But accessibility is a little bit different. It's how many places can you reach in that same amount of time. So if you think about being in Grand Bend, let's say, that half an hour, you can get quite far. You know, you can go up the coast of Lake Huron, you can get quite far in half an hour. But in downtown London, that half an hour, you might not be able to get as far, but you can reach a lot more places, right? There's a lot more destinations along the way. And so that term of accessibility is really important, especially in cities. Cities are designed to be where people and places are close together. And I think that's a really important thing when we talk about transportation, that it's not just about a mode or changing from, unsustainable mode of transportation to a sustainable mode. It's about how transportation affects land use and the sort of how the buildings look and feel, and how those buildings affect transportation. And that link is really important. And so I think when I think of sustainable, that word, I think we all have a pretty good idea of what that means, but it's not just environmental. There's a financial component to it. So we have to make decisions in our transportation system that are good financially for the long run as well. I think there's a health component to it. So right now, streets are sometimes one of the places where people unfortunately die in terms of accidental deaths or non-health related deaths the most. And so there's a danger component. And there's a social element to it as well. How we get around, it can be an opportunity to say hello to a neighbor, or it can actually connect us as people in our community, or it can kind of further keep us apart. So those things, so if I had to define it, I'd say sustainable mobility is transportation that encourages that compact development, because that's really important to bring or to increase accessibility. And it supports a healthy, happy, and affordable community. So that's a lot. And then I guess the barriers to achieving that, I've got 4 here. The first one is about parking. So right now we have parking minimums, and we have an abundance of free parking. And we all love free parking if we drive. I'm not, it's very easy to love it, but it actually does a lot of bad to getting around sustainably. The second thing is single-use zoning. And again, these are kind of boring topics, but they actually make a big difference. So if we have a neighborhood that's all houses, and then we have a area that's all retail, and you have to get from one to the other, if they were mixed together, it's a lot closer. We could choose to walk, we could bike, we could take transit. It'd be a lot easier to get there. The third thing is lack of good transportation alternatives. So we need a network of protected bike lanes to get around safely, and we need fast, reliable, and frequent transit. And then the last thing, and Ben touched on this already, lack of political will or a momentum of the status quo. There's just this like really strong momentum for the way things already are, and keep going. And so I'll leave it there.
I guess it's good coming third, and then probably tougher coming fourth or fifth. So now I'm going to use my probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 minutes here. So I read it as a couple minutes per question. And the reason is that I put a fair bit of thought into this because I'll tell you, it's not easy because you could go really simple. Sustainable mobility refers to transportation that is green and has a lower impact on the environment. And then just look at the suite of opportunities there, from cycling and walking right through to greener vehicles. But you could get even more complex. You could start saying a suite of policies, programs, and choices designed to move people today, efficient and affordably. You heard that from Daniel. But at the same time, designed to pursue or force change in the future. And that pursue or force really becomes the controversial aspect. But then, hey, this is my long one. It's really more, what are the sort of conditions or why is it important? And I've got a list I really want to share here with you. Number one, first, we've actually got to recognize that a gasoline or diesel personal vehicle, especially single occupant vehicle, is not sustainable. So you've got to start. You've got to admit that, and most don't. But then you've got to say we've got an aging population. We want a healthier population. We've got changing preferences in Londoners and newcomers to Londoners. As Ben mentioned, we have a proven track record in North America of sustainable mobility. We don't have to go to Europe. We've got the impact of severe weather, climate change adaptation needs, things that matter locally. But boy, do we ever have diverse opinions on how important it is locally here. We're not, we don't have glaciers that are melting in London. We have people who think climate change will bring a longer golf season. That's the mentality that we have to cross over. Number 7, we've got new technologies coming on board here. Those handheld devices are a key part of our future. They're actually a key part of sustainable transportation. We've got fuel switching. Get away from that gasoline and diesel. We've got electric buses coming, potentially. We've also got compressed natural gas for vehicles, all part of greening fleets. Shared mobility, such as the sharing economy, all part of our future. Car sharing, bike sharing, and everything in between. The sharing economy is just something that's taking off. And then we have to have a good look at what we know is right now the connected vehicle that's out on the streets as we speak, and then those autonomous vehicles that are not too far off. Now, as far as the challenges today, I'll stay away from the ones repeated because I quite agree with them. What we have to recognize, though, and most will not, is what we do today is key. We can't do this 10 to 20 years from now. So people have got to realize the urgency. North Americans and Londoners love their cars. I've got stats to prove it. We've got to shake that mentality. We also, though, have to actually embrace what we have in London. Celebrate it and realize that's our springboard for the future. The more we're encouraging people to use what we have for the right reasons brings that confidence to those that have to make the financial decisions provincially, federally, and locally. I'll be honest, one of the challenges, I don't think the provincial government or the federal government has ever said, we've got to change our car culture. They put in place thousands of programs, but they've never admitted the future is not the gas or diesel personal vehicle. That is not our future. But until someone says it's okay to state that and begin to plan for the disruption, manage those employees who are going to be displaced, I think we're going to be all struggling. You need to send that signal. Municipal council, we've heard that from a couple. It is not an easy decision because they have many, many priorities. But it is a key one that will be made over the next little bit, and it'll be key for everyone to be heard in that regard. We have competing interests for the limited financial dollars that we have locally. 2 last items here. It's resources. People in this room are being trained to be front and center on sustainable mobility. But when it comes to resources in the community, resources with staff at City Hall and everything in between, there's a lack of the ability to get there. We can change that by reprioritizing. And finally, though, we do have to overcome the apathy in the community. we don't have enough momentum. We're getting better, and we'll be talking about that too, because that will be part of the change. But the more we talk, the more people will listen. Under 4 minutes, right?
Well, Jay took my answer, so I
sorry.
really no, it's very hard to follow that. I think sustainability for me, it's the growth and development. And when I say growth and development and that stimulation, I don't mean corporate and I don't mean municipality, I mean individually. I think when you have the opportunity to look at different modes of transportation, different ways that you can change your environment, different ways that you can teach your children to change the environment, that's sustainable, and that's mobility to me. When I look at barriers, the biggest barrier I see is one word, and that's courage. I see a real lack of courage, not just in people making those decisions for us at every provincial, federal, municipal level. I see it within our own communities as well. And as someone who's in transit, it's a constant fight every day. I don't want this in my community. I don't want buses down my street. I don't want a bus stop near my house. That we need to do that. This is a city. This is how we move. Cities grow. Cities have to evolve. We have an opportunity. If we were to go ahead with rapid transit as it is, we had QTRIC come and do a study that showed electric buses would be a perfect fit for our community. Not only that, we will be a world leader in technology by doing electric buses on rapid transit. But the feedback that I've received is, well, that's too different. That's too much change. If we don't start now, we're not going to get that opportunity 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. So when I think of barriers, it's courage. It comes down to courage for all of us.
Yeah, speaking last is always great. So I really thought about my answer in terms of what my individual belief for sustainable mobility is, and I came up with any method that will endure the test of time and uses energy in the most efficient way. And for me, that's mass transit, whether we go back in the Wayback Machine and look at the stagecoach, rail, bus, plane, etc. They're all methods that have withstood the test of time, but also use energy and time in the most efficient way. And active transportation is also very sustainable, as we all know. It comes from a renewable energy source. It has withstood the test of time. We've all been walking since our parents taught us to. And all abilities, whether it's a stroller, a wheelchair, shoes. That's what I tell my kids. Our car today is our shoes because we're walking to the store or school or whatever. Rollerblades, longboards, skateboards, scooters, etc. They're all comprised of those things that is a renewable source. You can get anywhere you need to go most of the time in cities that are better designed than ours, perhaps. Into barriers. While on council, one of my colleagues, Jesse Helmer, has this phrase that he likes to use, and it's really hit home with me in a lot of ways. It says, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And that really hits home with me, because if we're so busy striving for perfect, perhaps we miss the opportunities to just do something good. We can talk about the bike lanes on King Street that, thank goodness, this council just finally passed. I got more political thoughts on that, but I'll keep them for another time. But we could have kicked the can down the road and not done anything, right? Or we could have waited to make it perfect, but they chose to do the good thing. So doing the good thing is a huge springboard to get to that vision of perfect, because without that good foundation, you lose all that work and you can't get to where you want to go. I think another thing in the way, and it kind of touches on what Jay was talking about in terms of people's love of their cars, and I think that is what I would call gluttony of mode share. We have people that will take their keys from their dead cold hands because they love their car so much, and the sheer thought of giving them a bus pass is like a horrifying thought, and they don't want any part of that. With that gluttony, they also have power over public policy. They have the ears of folks at City Hall, whether they're on the council horseshoe or different departments at City Hall. And that gluttony of power just kind of puts everybody else who has any sort of thought about what sustainability is or wanting to choose a different mode, we're kind of on the fringes at that point, and that's not exactly fair. And so that goes to my point about a lack of a level playing field. And I think another thing, in terms of cycling or walking or act of transportation, it's still looked at like recreation, as play, and it's not taking a really serious and respectful view on how people choose to move. Because for some people, when I tell my mother-in-law, oh, I'll just take the bus to the grocery store, it's like, oh, no, poor you can't take the bus. It's like, yes, I can. I take it every day, and I get there just safe and fine, and I can take my things home. But this whole attitude that poor you on public transit when you could have a car and be of the status symbol and all that sort of stuff. So going back to Jay's point, that's that big cultural shift that needs to happen. It's a matter of what pressure points do you hit so we can actually tip it over. And I think that's something we can all do, but we all have to think a long time about it.
Thank you for such an interesting and rich introduction to the idea of sustainable mobility. I think this gives us a great foundation for understanding what we're here talking about today. I'd like to open the floor now to first questions from my students and then questions from the general public. So can I have a volunteer to offer a first question? Eric.
So I noticed that a theme that came up a lot was the idea that there isn't always support on the ground for these policies or enough momentum on the ground for these policies. So what do you think are the best ways to promote a more positive attitude towards sustainable mobility in the general community?
I get to answer first. This is great. No, this is okay. No, the world's largest strike for climate is happening today. I mean, that's the action that we need to take today. We're way past the point of urgency that we need to ask nicely. Young people need to demand this be your future, because it is your future. We're going to lose cities like New York, Vancouver, and Halifax in my child's lifetime, and that is terrifying to me. So direct action, however you can make that happen. Make your point clear, make it loud, that we need to change how we operate as a society if we want to continue having this wonderful civilization that we built. If you don't care about civilization, then keep enjoying kind of the status quo.
And on a more hopeful note, I know. I think education is really important. It's easy to sit in a room like this where we're talking about sustainable mobility and kind of shake our fingers and say, oh, those other people, those car drivers who don't get it, or whatever it is, right? We need to have those conversations with just people that we know, and we need to spread this idea that cars aren't our future, like Jay kind of said, that this isn't something that we can build for in the future. Whereas I think a lot of people just see a roadway and they say, oh, we'll just widen that eventually, and that'll fix all our mobility issues in the city, and we'll build a parking garage there, and that'll be the next step, and or electric cars will solve all problems, and all those things are not true, nor are they sustainable in many ways. So I think just education about why moving to other modes is so important, I think, is helpful.
Rather than repeat, that Nike company, I'll tell you, they got it right when they said just do it. This is the funny part, or sad part, is that everyone has a role to play and everyone can get involved. And the best things for the environment are actually your lowest cost solutions. It's absolutely mind-boggling why we don't see more people walking, we don't see more people cycling, we don't see more people huddled at bus stops getting on mass transportation. It's all there. So I look at all that and says, yes, we do need a shock. We have to shock the system. And so we do need these strikes, and the sky is falling, because it might be. It definitely is in parts of the world, no doubt about it. Is it in London? Unfortunately, no. So my focus is London. The taxpayers pay me to try to motivate Londoners. That's what my job is, to get more people to do things right here in London. And fortunately, working with a community that grows every year doing that same thing. So hope is huge. The future is bright in London. But the future is you folks actually doing something. Not listening to me and shaking and saying, I agree. It's going home tonight and actually doing it. It is packing the sidewalks, packing the bike lanes. Because then what will happen is more will come. The confidence in the system will come. Right now, you got to say to yourself, there are 280,000 cars in London. That is 1 car per person between the ages of, I think it's 20 and 85. We love our car. That will probably apply to many cities across Canada. We've got to break that. We've got to get down to 1 car for every second person. It is doable. I'll stop preaching, but really it's up to you. It's not up to the city. It's for you to use what we have and you to request more.
Can I disagree on that for a second? Is that possible? Sure. Our city streets are built exclusively for the privilege and convenience of the motorist, and it is up to the city to make design streets that are safe and attractive for all users. And currently that's not the case. Preaching at people to say, go ride your bikes when there isn't a single protected bike lane that meets all ages and ability standards in the city, it's just totally unreasonable.
Sorry, and this is good, and I really do appreciate that comment, and it's not a surprise. It's actually a very, very good comment. Fortunately, when we eventually get to solutions and all that, the city has now moved to things such as complete street design guidelines to be implemented. So as Ben's pointed out, there's many improvements that must come, no doubt about that. I am a firm believer, and we choose to disagree on this. The Thames Valley Parkway is an excellent piece, and I think everyone agrees on that. We need to say we need more of that. We need to have those protected bike lanes. I'm a fan of them too. So we've got to do that. So yes, the city has a tremendous responsibility in this, as does everyone in this room. Is that a bit better?
I think the individual responsibility has nothing to do with it. Okay. It's all about design.
Then we'll choose to
people will choose the thing that is easy, safe, and convenient for them.
Yeah, okay. When I was a kid, we were always outside. We were outside, we were riding our bikes, we were on our skateboards, we were running the neighborhood. When I walk down my street now, which has at least 7 young families, I don't know what any of their children look like. They're driven to school. They don't know how to ride bicycles. If they do, I've never seen them outside in the last 10 or 15 years. So I think in some regard, while I do agree with you, Ben, that I don't think a lot of the city is built for pedestrians or cyclists, we still have an obligation to get out and walk the walk, talk the talk. I think that it's very easy to tell people you should take the bus more when they don't understand the challenges that there are taking the bus. I've been taking LTC for 40 years. I can tell you we've had more improvements in the last 5 years than I've seen in the last 35. So things are changing, but attitudes and perspectives are not. And I think that if you want change, you have to be the change that people want to see. I think protests are great, but they're as useful as the next news cycle is. So by tomorrow, I didn't even know about that protest today, and I've been on social media all day. So don't tell my boss that. But it takes a back seat to the tragedy in Christchurch. Not that it isn't important. It's just the news cycle moves so quickly. So things like protests aren't always at top of mind. I think if you want to see change in your neighborhood and your community, apart from monkey see, monkey do, get out and vote. Know who you're voting for. Just because you hear everyone believes this, so I'm going to vote for this person, that does not make it accurate. It does not make it true, and it is not going to make things any better for you.
So I think what we've heard is culture needs to turn on a dime, but public policies like the Queen Mary, and it's going to take 5-6 turns of the wheel to get to where we need to be at this point in time. And Cheryl really hit the nail on the head in terms of voting. Those people are the ones making the policy investment decisions, and if they're not ready to turn on the dime, then our public policy is not ready to turn on the dime. We don't have policies that are flexible enough to adapt to where we need to be. So I think it's important that no matter if you're advocating on the provincial, federal, or municipal level, you have to have your voice heard, right? And you have to recognize those opportunities, whether it's a public participation meeting at City Hall that I want you to go to next Wednesday at 3:00 at Centennial Hall, or, just comments on the media section, because councillors read those, just saying, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So getting to that point where you're confident enough that you want to convey your message in a way that's meaningful, respectful, because those are the conversations that really stay home with people. If you're going to fluff and be juvenile about it, you're not going to be listened to. So be adults about it. It's my best advice.
Thank you very much. Pass this to you.
I have a more specific question, I guess, and I was just wondering your opinion on this regarding modes of sustainable mobility. So I was in San Francisco recently, and I noticed on every street corner there was these little electric scooters locked up on posts everywhere. And basically, I wanted to try it out. So you download an app, and then you can take the scooter around the city wherever you want. I rode it all the way to the subway for half an hour. It was totally safe, and I loved it. So I was wondering what your opinion of implementing something like that would be, or if it even is a good idea, I guess.
Thank you. So this past term of council, we were working on getting shareable bikes, and it was to be funded through the gas tax money. Unfortunately, with the changes of the new government, that funding never materialized. But I think that having the access to something like that is tremendous, and it's easy, and it gets you where you need to go. And those are the three things people are looking for in terms of transportation. Easy, affordable, gets me where I want to go, and it's fun. So there's a fourth thing, right?
Easy, affordable, fun, gets me where I want to go. I'm all in on all of those things. What I don't see in London for a bike share or a scooter project is a safe place to ride that scooter. That's it, plain and simple. I have a beautiful bike sitting on my front porch that I've never taken on a city street, simply because I don't feel safe. If I want to use the bike lanes in my neighborhood, I have to go at least 3.5 kilometers out of my way to get to my destination to stay on those bike lanes. So yeah, it's a fantastic idea. And those are the things that we want to do. But unfortunately, we have to put into place the infrastructure to make sure that all of those options are safe and still being affordable, fun, and gets me where I want to go.
So a couple things. Now, the scooters that are in play in the U.S. right now in a big way, they're actually not legal to operate in Ontario at this point in time. There's a lot of good discussion occurring on that. There's a great pilot project occurring at University of Waterloo, but it's on sort of the private property, trying to get a handle on just how these units can be classified. It's part of the Highway Traffic Act. So there's a lot of good work being done on that. As far as bike share, fortunately there's been enough change with technology that the actual cost of those programs is changing dramatically. So we're actually currently pulling together a business case right now on bike share, looking at the newer models where the bike itself actually is your piece of technology. So costs have come down because of that. So it's an important part. But as we've heard from many people, for these to actually be truly successful, you have to have people riding them. You have to have people feeling safe out there too. So all these pieces, and you're going to hear that, do go hand in hand. And so something that'll be out for discussion next Wednesday, I think, Tanya, you've mentioned 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. There's actually about over $700 million in projects that are listed on this particular package that is before and out for public comment and discussion. In there are a lot of things. Well, in fact, the whole package deals with sustainable mobility. And within that, there's a lot of things on cycling, a lot of things on walking. So the future, once again, from my perspective, is bright. We've got to make these things stick and get them in place quickly.
So yeah, we refer to normally protected bike lanes, but they could be protected scooter lanes. It's the same thing. You have a safe place where you're not mixing with traffic. So yeah, it's huge that if we build these for today, whether we call them for bikes or for scooters, they work for both. And those scooters I know travel about the speed of a bike, so it's perfect.
Yeah. Jay, I'm glad you mentioned cost on this. It's an important thing. Almost all of the new technologies, the scooter companies, Uber, Lyft, they're all subsidized by venture capital right now. So there's nobody making money on any of those businesses. And as a business owner, kind of the thing you have to do to stay in business is to make money. I think one of the scooter companies in Nashville recently revealed that one of the scooters costs about $500 to put on the street and generates $70 in lifetime revenue before it's broken. So yeah, I mean, those are big issues as well to get around, is what is reliable and cost effective in the long term. These new technologies, they look really pretty and they look cheaper than the existing alternatives, but because they're subsidized to get off the ground, they may not be in the long term. They're really fun to ride, though. I've ridden a few. They're just so good. Fast, fun, efficient, gets me where I want to go. Yeah, definitely.
So my question is actually with regards to public transport. I had a different question initially, but I feel like this is what I should ask instead. So it's all nice and, to say we should all ride the bus and take bikes. But speaking for the majority of, I guess, the evil people who would rather drive, if I have, for example, a weekend to do something, if I have 3 hours to get the work done, and considering that the world is getting more globalized, like things are happening at the same time, we have to be on the move pretty much. If I have 3 hours, it's going to take me to maybe just one end of the town and then to the other end before I'm tired and, that's it. But if I'm driving, I can do so much more. So what is LTC doing, or what are the plans in place to make transportation with public system, because it is better for the community, I guess. But as a rational human being, I probably would choose to drive rather than take the bus, just because it saves me so much time.
We're both on the commission, just saying.
I can't speak publicly on behalf of the commission.
First of all, I don't think you're evil because you take the bus or because you drive your car. Some of the steps that we've taken, so the last 5 years have been to right-size the system. So essentially that's trying to get more buses to the people that have said, yes, we're committed to taking transit, because we were leaving a lot of people behind. Buses were crammed solid, and it just wasn't the best service. It's also the reason why we haven't implemented a fare increase in a decade. So the next 5 years is all about expanding that service. So we're adding at least, I believe it's 2 or 3 express routes. There's another express route coming in the fall for Argyle, so Argyle Mall to Western. Another express route going down Highbury all the way out to White Oaks Mall and into Fanshawe. We're changing stop spacing, increasing headways. There's all kinds of little things that we're doing to make it a better service. But for myself, as a transit user, I think the express routes are the best situation that we could ever possibly ask for, apart from rapid transit and dedicated lanes. So express routes will get you where you need to go considerably quicker, so long as they're not stopped by a train or a car accident or what have you. There are a lot of things that we're doing to improve that service. It's still going to take you time to get from one end of the city to the other. Even driving, I don't think you can get from White Oaks to Masonville in less than half an hour. So if I can get from White Oaks Mall to downtown in 11 minutes on an express route, and then I can transfer onto a route that's going to get me closer to my house, those are wins for me and for most transit users, I think. But there's no such thing as a perfect system, and anyone who thinks that transit's going to take them from point A to point B with ever having to deviate to transfer, getting from their house right to their destination, I think it's unreasonable thinking. Yes, having a car is absolutely convenient, and I completely agree with you. This morning when I was on the bus, I'm like, train, right? I'm going to be late. I have to text my boss. I have to, contact clients. I'm going to be a few minutes late. That's what it is. That's London. If I were in a car, I would still be probably late. So we have a lot of things to improve in transit, and we are definitely stepping towards the future, and the next 5 years is going to be very telling in how we're making it a better system. Anybody else?
So yes, I am on the London Transit Commission, but I cannot publicly speak on behalf of the London Transit Commission because of a bylaw. But what I will say to your point about the errand running, right? Unless you've got a sweet cargo bike like Ben has out front, sometimes buying 10-pound bags of potatoes is just not going to work if you have to haul it on the bus or on your own bike. So there are some instances where you're still going to need access to a single vehicle, right? or access to a friend's car or whatever. But I think what the important part is those frequent trips, like to work when you're just carrying your purse. Perhaps we should look at those frequent trips, because that's where you're actually using up more energy for a very scant amount of public good, I would say, because you're just getting yourself to work. But for those big long haul kind of things, that's when you could use like a vehicle, not feel any guilt about it in my own opinion, but I don't think you're evil. No.
Let's try something a little different here. So you're driving a car 3 hours on a Saturday. Okay, let's just make sure, one, you're driving the most fuel efficient vehicle possible. Not sure if you are, but your next car should be. Can you make sure it's a multi-purpose trip, that you're just not going out for one item alone? And can you get 2 or 3 other people in that car with you so they're doing the same trip? right away you can just say to yourself how many trips you've actually eliminated by doing a little bit of additional planning. We are such a just-in-time society. We have got to break that cycle, have a little more planning in all we do, and make sense of any of our trips.
I'm going to touch back on what I said about mobility versus accessibility. So again, if you're in, downtown London or Old East or something, some community where there's like everything you need right there, then it really does allow you to shift modes a lot easier. And so when we start building, or when we are building communities, when we're saying yes to new developments, it's important that we allow like mixed use, right? So commercial and residential together, and then just denser communities in general, right? So that in that hour on the bus, you can hit so many more places along the way. So I'll leave it there.
I'm really shocked that nobody mentioned the London plan. So there's this urban planner, Brent Tadarian, he's out of Vancouver, and his idea is the best transportation plan is a good land use plan. And designing a city that doesn't require you to run around driving for 3 hours is actually a better solution than making transportation go to all these places and moving people further distances. The shorter your distances are, the easier it is to make our whole mobility system more sustainable and just less energy intensive for moving you around the city. I think that's it. And I don't think you're evil either. I think that, we're living in the world that we were born into, and it's designed for getting around in a car.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, how's it going? You would think this would amplify, but it doesn't. I've had the ability to live in downtown as a student, and then my family lives in North London as well, in an urban area. And like what I've noticed living within urban London is obviously like urban sprawl, and like what happens is like we grow out of the city center into more like single family housing, and we take up more room and are a lot more inefficient when it comes to accessibility. So I guess kind of a comment that I wanted to make is that is the London plan talks about intensification and intensifying our population within the city center. And I've noticed that myself, you can walk anywhere you want to. I even had my car here and I didn't take it out because everything was close by, the grocery store, obviously the bars, which is a good place. But so is your social life, your economic life, your work life, and then your school as well. So I guess my question is just like, how can we intensify our urban areas within the City of London to make them more accessible? We talked about mixing commercial and residential housing, but like what other kind of examples can we use to intensify our urban areas, I guess?
So what Ben said, I'm going to say it in reverse. A good land use plan is a good transportation plan. So something called BRT, for instance, might help intensify, because if you've got developer X who has a piece of land beside a transit station or rapid transit station, they're much more willing to build in denser form because those potential residents or business owners now have a really good transportation solution to get to that place. So they go hand in hand. And you look at the subway in Toronto, right? And you see, if you look like an aerial view from Toronto, you can see the subway line more or less, especially Yonge Street. You can see all the dense development along the subway. So when you put in good transportation infrastructure, you get good dense development around it. And that's always been the case from way back when streetcars were built or a new highway starts a town, or so it's the same thing. We need to put the transportation infrastructure in and we'll get that intense development in.
Yeah, absolutely. Our little corner of businesses here at Innovation Works sort of exists in an ocean of parking. If you look at the London from the sky, I think parking something like takes up 30% of downtown in terms of its land use area. that's all opportunity to develop and build and grow. And I think that removing those parking lots, putting them underground in garages, doing that kind of thing, that can definitely help do it. If you look at other big cities around the world, the thing that's happening to downtown cores is they're going car-free or implementing congestion charges like the other London has. Oslo, Paris, Madrid, they're all committed to going car-free downtown at this point, and it's only a matter of time before this London is along that path too.
All good points. The London plan, I guess people have to keep that in mind. The folks here are quite involved in that as well, is that it actually is quite new. And in fact, in many ways, it is incredibly new and a fresh way of looking at the city. It is an official plan, but it went so much further. From our area, we actually call it almost the green plan because it is so good and positive in that regard from exactly these items you've heard. The challenge is a lot of the things you see being built here in London are still part of the old way of doing business. They were subdivisions approved 6-7 years ago under different circumstances, under different approval systems, under different official plans. So we're still in a mix of the old and the new. Fortunately, I guess in the last handful of years, we've seen 7 to 8 new high-rises downtown. We've seen the investment on Dundas, and we're paying dividends this weekend for the Junos being in town. We're seeing changes to the transportation system, more to come. So all the signs of improvement are there. But we still have to, we scratch our heads. A wonderful subdivision, essentially going in, called West 5. It is incredible what's going in, but it is so far out. It's just one of those strange pieces there. But that's a sign of the future. But if that was right next door to downtown, it would just be perfect. So a lot of things are going to change, and fortunately, we've set some really good direction.
I would put out a challenge to you. You said you live in the core? For school?
I used to live downtown. Now I live back in the urban area. So.
Okay. So what I would suggest, if you want to see, let me just backtrack a little bit. When you look at businesses in the core, there's a reason why stores want to be on Richmond Row. They can't afford mall prices. They can't afford the rent in the malls, and it's boutique shopping. It's walkable shopping. Same with Dundas Street. Same with Old East Village. So what I would suggest is you help people change their mind. Change your traffic pattern, change your habits for a month. So don't use your car, just use your bicycle, just walk, take transit. Explore your own community. See what's missing, see what's lacking. For myself, when I bought my house, it had to be on a good transit line. It had to be within walking distance of a grocery store. It had to be in walking distance of a school, medical care, all of these things because I don't drive. Right? And I had to be able to get my children to all of these places easily. And I had to make sure that what I was paying at property taxes was going to be a dividend to me and my family as well. So think about not what's already been done, but what you can do to change what could be coming. I think everyone's made some really good points about the London plan and what's coming in the future. We've built a city and then said, oh, we should probably think about transit, right? Summerside is a great example. Masonville area is another good example. You build these big houses, and they're big, beautiful houses. And I think there's a perception that if people have big, beautiful houses, they don't need transit because transit's only for people who don't afford or can't afford big, beautiful houses. So we have to change that mindset. But first of all, start with yourself. Start to explore your own neighborhood, see what's lacking, and see why.
Yeah, Cheryl raises a really good point in terms of like a neighborhood ecosystem. Do you have the butcher, baker, candlestick maker nearby, right? And I think that challenge to say, does your neighborhood have that or not, is pretty good. I want to talk about the cognitive dissonance in the downtown. We've got some business owners that believe that all of their clientele is coming from the outside in. Or if we, take a dedicated lane on Richmond Street, you're going to kill my business. I put the challenge out to them to say, see how many bus transfers are on your table at the end of a meal. If you say, transit riders, leave your bus transfer here so I have an idea of who my client is. In the downtown, we have over 30,000 people that work here, but maybe they're leaving after 5. But I would say that the Downtown Business Association has done a lot to keep that here. So I would say that the downtown is an ecosystem unto itself. We have neighborhoods that support it in terms of shopping, in terms of working, in terms of playing in the downtown. but what are we doing to bring those other people in? And on the other end of that, the cognitive dissonance part I was talking about, when we have those people that are here to support the downtown, what are we doing to support them in turn? Making sure that they have the amenities that they need. We all know that the long-standing agreement, and pardon me if you don't live in London and didn't grow up here, but the long-standing argument of downtown is we're missing a grocery store. Well, yeah, you're missing a Zayres or a Loblaws or what have you, but we've got the Covent Garden Market, which you can go buy your apples and your pork chops or your lentils or whatever, and you can take them back to your apartment across the road. So I also work as a real estate agent, and I would say that the market demand in the downtown is the retirees and students. Like, it's this tipping point of where's the middle-aged people or the people with the young kids and all that, but we're seeing a tipping point there. But when we have policies in place for temporary parking instead of putting up a building, and the city just keeps kind of refreshing that over and over again, we're not doing anything to promote better, more sustainable land use. So I think Council of the Day and Council's Future have to really be mindful of that, what they're putting in the downtown. And really, I think the clientele of downtown needs to be known where they're coming from, what kind of a market they're bringing to bear.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Maybe we'll take one from the general public.
Hi, a big thank you to the panelists for sharing today. This is all really interesting, really wonderful. I think I do want to maybe push back just a little bit. I think that probably all of us here agree that there needs to be a broader change in the status quo. I think that a lot of what I'm hearing, though, is things like we need to educate the public, students need to get out and walk more, bike more, take the bus more. There's a need for hope and optimism. All this stuff is really nice, but I would also say, as somebody who's spent a lot of time researching and paying attention to environmental communication, is that kind of discourse is the status quo. I mean, people have been saying those things for 20 years. And the fact of the matter is that we live in a country where our overall carbon emissions are going up. Our overall economic dependency on fossil fuels is going up. And we can talk about optimism versus pessimism, but the fact of the matter is that we're not on track to meet these absolutely essential goals that are very carefully measured, very carefully laid out. So I wanted to put the question to you, as you're all people who have spent a lot of time thinking about this, obviously in various official capacities, but also probably in more imaginative capacities, in more speculative capacities. I guess my question would be, if you personally, not in your sort of official public role, but you personally, what is the kind of, like, if you could name one thing that you could imagine being really the crux of the discussion on sustainability, if you could say, here's one thing that I can imagine that would make the greatest change, that would be most sort of conforming to what I believe in terms of sustainability, what would that thing be?
Would you like to start, Ben?
To start with the big question first. Thanks for the question. That's deep. I come to work every day to give people an opportunity to reduce their carbon emissions, and that's why I'm here every day. And I think that I basically decided that as a geologist who understands the problem and understands the urgency of the problem, that's been my personal crux towards this, is that we have about 10 years to get this problem under control. And I think we need to light a fire under the people who are going to live with the consequences in the future, and recognize that this problem isn't something that we can solve in 5 to 10 year plans. This is something we need to do now every single day. And if you could walk away from today with one idea about this, is just recognizing how rapid and how fast we have to move a really immensely immovable system. That's one thing that I think is the biggest challenge, is moving this giant ship in a direction that's going to give us a viable future.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out what you said, 'cause I think it's true that sometimes we've patted each other on the back, or tried to dangle the carrot too much to say, oh, you have to choose a sustainable mode, and we haven't done enough of the carrot and the stick, right? We need to kind of force in some ways. But you asked the personal question, so I think, I don't know, this is so hard, but one thing I'll say is maybe we need to start talking about cars in the negative a lot more and like be very clear about it. Because I think it's, like Jay said, no one federally or provincially talks about cars in the negative because there's this great momentum of jobs and there's a whole ecosystem there. So maybe we do need to be more clear about not just environmentally, but the other impacts that cars have in a negative way. So that's my one thought is maybe be very clear about the costs we put on society when we drive.
Boy. I'm going to go two ways. We spend a lot of money on many things, but we don't throw a sustainability lens on that expenditure. And we should, because we could be spending the same amount of money, but spending it differently, and we would be further ahead. That is crucial. A good example is we spend $1.5 billion a year on average on energy in this city. Businesses, individuals, schools. Across all of that, about 90% actually leaves our local economy. It disappears. We make some changes to that. That money then stays in our economy locally. Energy efficiency into your home. Cycling as opposed to sending a check to Alberta for gas. So there's those things that can be done. Yes, you have to educate people on that, though. I don't think you can ever stop. And if you think that you're getting through to them, you just have to find a different way of demonstrating to them. In the case of the city, we love working with community groups because community groups are actually much closer to the community than the city is. And that's how we're actually doing a lot of our work right now because we're getting a better impact. From an individual perspective, absolutely. I do my best with my wife. We were a family of 4, we're now a family of 2. We're making appropriate adjustments. I'm far from perfect, but every day I look at what can I actually do a little bit better. And I do share that with people.
For me, it comes down to stigma, especially when it comes to public transit. I think that London has built this perception that people who take transit are poor people or people who have lost their driver's license for criminal reasons. And I've heard this over and over again in the last 3 years, especially at rapid transit meetings where this one gets me the hardest. It was a very prominent business owner who said, my customers don't want to take the bus with those kinds of people. And I'm standing beside this person and I'm thinking, I'm a Fanshawe college student. I have 3 jobs. I have a family. I own my own home. I'm a pretty stable individual and I take the bus every day. That's my primary mode of transportation. So am I one of those people? So I feel like my entire life I've been fighting against that stigma of the loser cruiser or the welfare wagon for people who take public transit. And really, yes, there's people who don't really have any other choice because of their financial situation. There's also people who make a conscious choice. There's people who just don't enjoy driving. There's people who have student loans that are through the roof and at some point maybe will buy a vehicle, but right now transit is the best option for them. These are our future leaders. These are the people that have led our city for a really long time and they're forced to take the stigma. And anyone who's taken transit before and has been talked down to, you understand what that means. If someone says, oh, you take the bus, oh, you take the bus? Can I give you a ride? Like you're doing me a big favor. I have a ride. It's already heated up. I don't have to brush it off. I'm ready to go. So I think in answer of your question, my own personal goal is to eliminate that stigma. I don't care if you're taking the bus, if you're riding a skateboard, you're taking transit, you're just a person and you're trying to get around in a sustainable way.
Thanks. Because the perimeters of your very deep question were so very vast, I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said because I do agree. But I think if I had a magic wand approach, reducing the amount of available fossil fuels would kind of end our problem right now because we'd have to adapt. That's a big stick. You have to find your own carrot, but you'd have that big stick. and being able to adapt a behavior that's been so entrenched in a culture for however long, I don't know where the pressure points are to flip that over. But you see the groups of people kind of fraying off of that global mindset in terms of making their own decisions. So let's just get rid of the fossil fuels, and we will just fix it all that way.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have, and that's an excellent question to end on. So I think we'll end there. I'm not sure if panelists have a few minutes to hang around and speak with people on an individual basis. If you do, that would be wonderful. If not, not a problem. But I do want to thank you so much for being here. This was an incredible panel, very rich and engaging discussion. I want to thank my students for participating, the audience members for attending, the London Bicycle Cafe for offering to host, and Ben Durham for doing all of the video work. So thank you very much to everybody. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.